protect the environment. And for us, we have chosen to do so and to do something today by calling upon all of you to join us in exchanging policy views on climate change issues. Climate change has various harmful effects, including changes that we see in our seasons.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, it is now evident that climate-induced hazards do pose a very big threat to Kenya's path towards the realization of our Vision 2030, also the Sustainable Development Goals, and also lately the Big Four agenda of the government.
And it is not far-fetched. If we think about what we have gone through with the onset of the long rains, we have experienced mudfloods, bridges being destroyed, damages to infrastructure. We've also seen in our city heavy traffic.
So there are also huge social and environmental losses that are associated with these calamities, meaning that disasters can no longer be ignored. As recently witnessed with the collapse, and this was really unfortunate, of the Solai Dam in Nakuru County. And I urge and challenge all stakeholders to play their role effectively in ensuring that disasters do not anymore continue to be an emergency in this part of the world.
On average, it is estimated that the country loses between 2 to 2.8% per annum of GDP as a result of the climate-related hazards. More importantly, these hazards cause macroeconomic imbalances, mostly felt in the fiscal sector as well as the external sector. These events have negative effects on the economic sector, manifested in the disruption of the production flows, which results in production losses, increased operational costs, lost income, unemployment. Droughts in particular reduce government revenues following decline in tax collection, brought about by production losses and destruction of productive fixtures. Expenditures also increase, especially expenditures related to responses, building resilience, and mitigation measures necessitated by the disasters.
All right, those were just some of the key messages that were being passed at the just concluded KIPPRA annual regional conference, and a lot, that was discussed during that time. What we want to do right here on Good Morning Kenya is to sort of have a post-conference interview just to see how we can go ahead and put whatever was discussed, whatever document that was presented beyond paper and now make it practical in our country. Today we're talking about flood and drought, not preparedness actually. The better term to use in this case is prevention, because we always are more or less a reactive country as opposed to being proactive when it comes to these emergencies that we face. The other day, just last year, our country, actually in 2016, our country was one of those countries that were hit by drought for a better part of 2016 and even some months into 2017. Then a few months down the line, we saw hundreds of people suffering from the floods that until now we are still coming out of that and still, suffering the consequences. So drought and flood, these are things that are like on so different positions, if you may ask me. One time we have very little water and shortage of food, and the other time we have just so much water in our country. So what is going on? Where do we miss the point? And what can we do going forward to make sure that we are ready as a country to be able to fight these disasters? And talking about drought, today as the budget is being read, we remember in February 2017, actually, the government declared drought a national disaster, and it took a better part of our budget that was read in March of 2017. So floods just the other day affected our country. Are we going to see it also make a major part of the budget reading process today? These are some of the questions that we will be asking my guests for the show this morning. And who better than having them that organize the conference themselves to talk about these very important issues. And my panel has two guests this morning, a lady and a gentleman. Allow me to introduce them this morning. I'll start with the lady. Ladies first, they say. Looking all good here is Dr. Rose Ngugi, the Executive Director of KIPPRA. KIPPRA is the Kenya Institute of Policy Research and Analysis. Yes, I hope I got that right. It's quite a mouthful. Kenya Institute of Policy Research and Analysis. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And then we have Joshua Laichena. He is a policy analyst also from KIPPRA. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So let's begin, by just, the intro that I've just given on this particular conversation. At one time, we are facing drought. At another time, we are facing challenges of floods. What is wrong with our country? Where do we miss the mark? What are some of the things that probably we don't do right that we end up always finding ourselves in this cycle? It's not the first time that we've had this in our country. So I want to know where we miss the mark as an opening statement to this particular conversation. Any of you can jump on this, or should I start with you, Dr.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll start by saying that the institution, Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and Analysis, is a government think tank, and it has its mandate to carry out research that can support evidence-based policy. And we also do capacity building, again, to ensure that the public policy process is well informed.
All right.
One of our key mandates is to ensure that we can bring together stakeholders, talk about key policy issues that are affecting the development agenda of this country. And as you have collectively put it, drought and floods, which have become more intense, more frequent, and it looks like going forward with the issues of climate change,
yes,
they may become more frequent, and we need to be more prepared than maybe before. And I would say that as we're organizing our conference between the 5th and 7th, this is the same time of June, this is the same time that we were celebrating the World Environmental Day.
Yes.
And we wanted to celebrate it in a different way, and say that when we think about environmental issues, climate change is an issue, drought and floods are an issue to this country. And what came out of the conference is that possibly the preparedness that we have could be something that we want to strengthen. The fact that the early warning system may not necessarily be tight enough. The fact that you could be talking to community and maybe giving them information that you need to move to higher grounds when the floods come in. But because possibly either out of ignorance or possibly because they don't have an alternative of the higher grounds to move to, then they just sit back
and wait until the last minute.
And it's like seeing is believing, and therefore I'll move when the floods come in. And the same thing with drought. Drought is something that comes in slowly, and it means that over time you can see when it is intensifying, and possibly one may be more ready than when the droughts, when the floods come in. But again, you find that we are not even more prepared. We don't have maybe alternative tools. Talk about agriculture, which is highly impacted. I grow maize in my small farm. The drought comes and it takes everything. The next year I'll still do the same thing. But I'm not necessarily picking up maybe in a new breed, which can, or in a new activity that can actually make me more resilient. So from the conference, it was very clear that there are different things that we can do, tapping into technology that can actually make us more resilient. Because drought and floods are here to stay as the climate change hits us.
So we need to be better prepared for the next season of these calamities that will befall us. And even as you talk about drought, it's also true that, as a country or as a society, we only think of maize as a staple food. We only think of you know, we have like that one food that all of us depend on. So when it is not there, then it's like we're saying we're facing a shortage of food. But I like where we are going with this, where you're trying to sort of open up agriculture to technology, to other types of crops that people can plant, so that we have variety and be able to be food secure as a country. But I don't know what your take home was, Joshua, from the conference. What are some of the key messages that also stood out for you individually from that particular conference? It was on from the 5th to the 7th?
Yeah.
Yes. Talk to us about what stood out for you.
Thank you very much. I will start from where the directors left on planning. And what came out very clearly from the conference is that although there is planning that is not coordinated, we need to do better. For example, Nairobi floods every time it rains.
Yeah.
And the simple reason that maybe was coming out from the conference is we have every place it is road, it is everywhere it is built. And these structures collect water. So this water does not have an opportunity to percolate. So it runs. It collects and then it goes down, it actually goes carrying everything.
Oh.
But then what maybe we need to do is moving forward, we need to see how we can have either policy to be able to put in place, so that if we are constructing, we have the structure, we know the area that is covered by the building, that water can be collected and can be harvested for use. That's one that came out. The second thing is that use of technology, where, for example, in some countries like India, people are very well trained. And we can use technology, especially about flooding. We can have gadgets that are put on the river, and they are able to monitor the water levels.
Okay.
These water levels can be monitored, and then if it reaches a crisis or the level that is very risky, then the message can be sent out to those people who are around there, and they can actually be able to move to higher grounds. And then finally, to close on this, of course, we have observed what has happened in terms of deaths that occur and the destructions.
Remember even the Solai Dam tragedy the other day, really unfortunate.
Some of them you may not be able to prevent, but actually that's why I said planning, starting with the planning. Do we have the structures? Are they constructed very well, like the dams now that you have mentioned? Is it architecturally constructed well? Is it supervised? So that we ensure that those disasters may not happen. So in short, that is what came out. There are very many things that came out. We cannot talk about all of them here. Yeah.
All right, but then all these strategies that you're mentioning, things that it's sort of like an advice of what we need to do going forward. Haven't we done some of this before, or we just seem to be taking a lot of things for granted? Dr.
When we look at the institutional setups that are there, it's very true that in 2011, after the very major drought that hit this country, not only did we meet as a region under the IGAD, and we were able to establish the National Drought Management Authority, which has been very focused on trying to facilitate the communities and also trying to work with the government and other international bodies to ensure that we can build the resilience.
Okay.
But that aside, NDMA only covers about 23 counties in this country. And it's only focused on drought matters, But now, just the other day, the government has come up with a national disaster management policy. And this policy is going to look at both the drought issues and the flood issues, which were not necessarily focused on before.
Okay.
And going forward, what we expect is that the policy will be able to capture the disasters in good time, because it's also looking at the totality, not just drought and floods, but the totality of everything. But more importantly is the involvement also of the county governments, because even when you look at the Schedule 4 of the Constitution, the county government also have a role to play.
Okay.
But it is how then you coordinate between the national government and the county governments. And this would help quite a lot in ensuring that the community themselves, you create awareness that it's true. When you're hit by drought, maybe you could change the way of your livelihood. When you're hit by floods, maybe you don't just have to wait and see, and then you start saying that, this is the time you call for help. And within that, there are also some contingency funds that have been set up. And as you said from the beginning that, we were caught up in February last year and we had to do a budget reallocation. Yes.
And right now, I don't know whether we are going to face the same situation.
So the idea is that can we have then some money put aside that can actually help, so that when it happens, it's not like now we have to sit back and get supplementary budget and the like. And with this pool of funds, it's not just the government, but also asking the donor community. You've been helping on the ground. Can we pull these resources together and be able to prepare ourselves better, so that when we are going to the ground, we go as a coordinated team and we are able to respond more effectively.
Right.
Yeah.
Joshua, you are a policy analyst. I want to understand what the role of policy is in trying to manage such disasters like floods and drought. How do they work hand in hand to help us, get to a better space as a country?
Okay, actually the country and the economy moves through planning. And you can actually be able to do better if you have more evidence-based research that actually focuses on what really needs to be done and how to be done and the best way to do it. Because in policy analysis, we have to give alternatives that we can actually be able to follow a certain path to be able to counter a certain kind of disaster. Say, for example, the conference that we had, there are very many things that came out of that conference that actually we had conclusions at the end of the day. So that the 13th point that we had, obviously the trying to propose areas that need attention, and actually this came from various stakeholders, from the disabled, from those people, the CBOs, the international community that were there, and this information actually was very key in coming up with those points. And of course, there are various organizations or the department of the government that will be involved. So in terms of policy now, we have come up with those areas that there are weaknesses that we can be able to tighten, so that now, when we are planning for droughts, when we are responding to droughts, we have a clear area that we need to focus on. Yes.
Sort of like you set like a way of the steps that, like, we have a problem, but you're giving us a way through, like this, if we take this route, then we're going to get a solution to this problem.
Correct.
Okay.
Normally what happens is that without evidence, without you going out of the ground to see really what happens, and to be able to collect information for the people who are affected, from the people who manages it, it is very difficult to sit in the office or to sit somewhere and then think this is what happens. So the role of police actually is to be able to piece the information together, to bring, and then it can be able to give a bigger picture on really what is happening on the ground, what is missing, and what is it that now can be done. So that is our role. So once we come up with that, the implementers, they are going to pick from where we left. They pick one of the things that that is not tightened very clearly, and then we can be able to move forward.
I want to understand now, post-conference, you're talking about implementers. What's next about all these things you discussed, about these beautiful policies you've come up with? What is the next step now that we should take as a country, so that we make sure that whatever was discussed, whatever you came up with, are implemented, and they actually help us in solving the problems that we face during drought and floods? What's the next step after this?
One of the first steps that we made immediately after the conference, coming up with the 13 points, we were able to share it with our PS planning, State Department of Planning. You know that everything that we do in Kenya, as far as the planning aspects, comes under the Ministry of Planning.
Yes.
So that's the first door that we knocked. And we were able to share with them the 13 points and say, okay, from the conference, these are the things that we really need to focus on. From there, we are hoping also that we can also talk with the county governments. They also have a major role to play, and tell them that since the Kakamega conference that they had organized, one of the key areas that they had focused on is how to deal with the climate change disasters.
Okay,
And we can also share with them the same document and tell them these are the issues.
This is during the devolution conference.
Okay. That issue came up. But more importantly is that now we have the issues we came up with. We have also the policy that just came just before the conference. We can marry this together and come up with a monitoring process to say that, first of all, are these issues well contextualized in the policy? Yes. And who has what responsibility? And as KIPPRA, one of the key things that we normally do is reviewing the implementation of our policy. We don't implement, but we review and say, are we moving in the right direction? And where are we missing the gaps going forward? So we have a key role to play in ensuring that we can monitor the process of implementation.
So your role, you do not stop at just providing the policies. You have to like follow through to see how they are being implemented and even offer advice post that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's look at how, you wanted to add something?
Yes,
okay, go ahead.
Obviously, when climate change causes the havoc that we are fighting, it is not localized to one place. It does not affect one category of people. It does not affect one country. So I see in moving forward with those 13 points, even being able to talk with our colleagues, our neighbors, East Africa, and in the international community, to be able to see what is it that can be able to pick from there. So that as we move together, because this is affecting all of us, where can they come in? Because each one of us has got a role to play in terms of actually seeing that the droughts and floods do not become disasters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's, mostly what we saw even across the media when we faced the floods just the other day and even during the drought was how people were dying and the loss of life and the destruction of property. But I want to understand on a larger scale, how are we affected by drought and floods? How are we affected in terms of the different sectors and even the different regions? What are some of the things that you feel are really, really like an impact of these emergencies?
At the macro level, what has been evidence is that this country loses about 2 to 3% of the GDP, the gross domestic product, or the total output of this economy is lost. 2 to 3% is a very huge amount, from the drought and the floods. At the same time, it's also estimated that when you are recovering, when you are responding, because you were not being prepared very well, you spend 7 times the effort that you could have spent in that desperate moment.
Okay.
So at that macro level, that is what one sees. But at the household level, there's a lot that goes on. I lose my asset. When I lose my cattle, when I lose my goats, when I can't harvest my maize, that's an asset. And if we are talking about wealth creation, then I'm already weakened from that point. When the floods come and we have diseases coming up, my health is also affected. And it means that either the systems, the health system has to spend more in trying to treat whatever is coming up. But when we think about even the infrastructure, remember how much we have lost in terms of the roads being destroyed.
Yeah, true.
Who comes
and
back
now we
to
have to go back and
reconstruct? Right? You can imagine that the government will come back and have to finance the same. Not forgetting that when we were importing maize and the like, we had to waiver the import duties. It's a source of revenue for the government.
So that's a loss.
That's a loss. That's a loss on the country. When you have electricity disconnected, or the tariffs going up, you affect the manufacturing sector.
Exactly.
The manufacturing sector is not giving you the output. It's not employing, and it's not also generating the tax revenue that the government needs. So in totality, when you look at it, it has quite a multiplier effect that affects the development agenda, as I want to put it, because if you think about the Vision 2030 and where we want to go, we may not necessarily manage to get there if we are not able to gain the 2 to 3% that we lose of GDP with the drought and floods.
Okay. I don't know. Okay.
Just one more. For example, I will take drought. When we have drought, what happens is actually, because we depend on a larger percentage on hydroelectrical power. So we found that it is supplemented through very costly power generation. The power bills goes up, and actually, if you look at the industries, they always be impacted very heavily in terms of cost, and that cost is passed down to the common citizen, and they absorb that. Now, if you look at our larger part of our country, which is arid, say for example when there is also drought, these are a category of people who generally are pastoralists. They move from one place to another. Now when they move with their livestock away from where they are settled, obviously children, lactating mothers and pregnant mothers will be left. If they move with them, they move them away from those facilities they can be able to get access, for example, health services. So they are impacted in that manner. When we talk about floods, for the same, you will find that people with disability, they are heavily affected. For example, if there is any flood that is coming on the way, so if they are blind people, they cannot be able to see. If they are those who have physical disabilities, they can actually not be they cannot be assisted. So you will find that these are the people who are heavily affected, and they are brothers and sisters. So in total, you will find that those who are affected much are the vulnerable groups, as I've mentioned. Yes.
And we also find that during that time we see an influx in diseases like cholera, especially during floods, and even people being facing a lot of health issues because of proper lack of nutrition. And it's just go on and on. It's a list that is endless. The impact of drought and floods in our country is just so great, and something needs to be done to prepare us better when the next one comes. I'm trying to see, I want to know who now is given this mandate. Whose role is it to be able to play a part in making sure that going forward we are better prepared for these emergencies? Which sectors, which stakeholders can you share with us this morning? Whose responsibility should it be? I know it should begin with everybody, but generally speaking, whose responsibility is it?
From the government point of view, as indicated constitutionally, both the national government and the county government have a role to play. At the national government level, we have the National Drought Management Authority, which has a major role. But now, with the new policy, the expectation is that we'll expound that mandate, so that we can capture even the flood-related aspect, not just the drought. But beyond the national government, which actually bears a lot at the end of the day, we have NGOs who work on the ground, and they really do quite a very good job. We have other development partners who also support in terms of the funding. And at the community level, some counties are coming up with what we call county steering groups.
Okay.
And with these groups, they bring in the NDMA, they also bring in community leaders, they also bring in development partners, so that they are able to chart the way forward when they are responding. Yeah? And of course, the Mwananchi themselves also is a key stakeholder in all this.
Yeah.
So when you look at all these partners who have to work together, it means that we need a very clear system of coordination, because in some counties what we found is that in as much as the county steering committee or group meets and they are in agreement, yes, this is what, but the minute the response comes and it hits, then you find it's like I myself, I was working in a certain village, I move on and I continue doing my work, and another organization continue moving with their work, and at the end of the day you realize, oh, you're in the field and I was also in the field, and actually we had agreed that we would be in the field, but you are doing your own thing, I'm doing my own thing.
So they're not working together.
So in that sense, then you either have a lot of duplication of the roles.
Duties, yeah.
Maybe there could be some wastage, because if we had put
unnecessary expenditures.
Unnecessary expenditures. Yeah. If we had put everything together, it would mean that effectively we would actually manage to respond, not just on time. And we like the media because they bring out some of these issues. Yeah? And the media has a major role to play. Remember what happened in Ethiopia in the mid-1980s, yeah? Well, it's not for the media. We wouldn't have known the crisis that we had with that major drought that affected the region. So the role of the media is also very critical in ensuring that we get to understand what is happening on the ground. Yeah.
All right. If all these stakeholders were to work together, like you say, then they will pull their efforts into one point, and it will have a greater impact in terms of response and preparedness. But do they have like an organized framework that defines how they should operate? Is there like something that is already defined that they can follow, that guide them on how they should operate and implement this responsibility?
Maybe what we can be able to see is the new policy that came. We need actually, as stakeholders, maybe for us KIPPRA, we'll be able to look at it, because actually it came out at the time we were having the conference.
Okay.
We need to interrogate it and see whether it is really able to put all the stakeholders together, so that now what we are talking about coordination is covered in. The director said that we will not stop there. We will be able to follow up. So now, in terms of being to see whether all the organizations that are working in a specific area are coordinated. That coordination framework, we'll be able to look at it, and we'll also be reaching out to NDMA again to be able to see how this is linked together. Okay. But I wanted to say one more thing in terms of people having who is to bear responsibility, or what can we be able to do. Communities have got a lot of indigenous knowledge. They understand this area, they understand those disasters, they have been with them. So it would be important for any party that is planning for the disasters to be able to consult them, so that they can actually be able to better understand what really they face and what the indigenous people think should be done.
Okay.
Yes.
Because most of the time you're telling the people to move to safer grounds, they don't understand what you're telling them.
Yes.
Probably, like you say, if they were to work together, then all these implementations of the policies would be accepted, they would be welcomed.
Yes.
Yes. Going forward, let's look at funding. Do you think we have gotten to that point as a country where we have allocated enough budget for response of these emergencies? Are these stakeholders well equipped in terms of finances to be able to implement this responsibility? Do you feel they are there?
As when we started, you said, we keep reallocating anytime we are hit, yeah? which means that at the end of the day, we have to look for ways of doing that. But that's changing. As I said, there is a contingency fund that is coming up. There is also a drought emergency fund that has been built. And the government has allocated as an initial amount, I think, with this budget of about 5 billion, yeah? 5 billion, yeah? 5 billion may not be enough. If we consider that between 2016 and 2017, during the drought period, I think the government spent more than 20 billion, yeah? So that 5 billion is just a small amount, yeah? But if we have the development partners, if we're able to mobilize that resource and to build up that fund, then we'll be saying that, okay, next time when it comes, we are in a position to actually handle. But more importantly is also asking ourselves, are we able to see the magnitude at the very beginning? Because maybe the weatherman tells us that maybe the drought may be there just for another 3 months. And then it is prolonged. When it is prolonged, then issues start creeping in. That you may have been prepared for 3 months, but you realize that
you need this for
longer
than 3 months.
3 months. And then the fact that the drought comes just at the back of the flood, then you are like, again, I have dealt with the floods, I have dealt with the drought, and it's done.
Maybe you've depleted all
You've depleted that. Now it's a very new element that you're dealing with when the floods start. So being able to actually articulate that the frequencies have increased and the intensities have increased, I think it's for that reason that the government is coming up with a very clear policy and trying to pull together some funds that will help us going forward. Yes, yes.
Is there, just out of curiosity, is there any technological aspect that interests you that you feel would help better in preparing for these disasters going forward? Anything that strikes your mind, technologically speaking, that you think can help in this journey?
Early warning system is part of the information can be able to use. So that, because I think the weatherman these days predicts very well. Is able to tell us that it is going to have, we are going to have a drought period of this particular time. Now, because of that, we can do better planning using technology. We can actually use telephones, mobile phones, so that if there is anything that is coming out and we know that there are risks that are involved, the normal way we get SMSs, say for example there is a function marathon, you get the information coming. This can be shared with the service providers, an information that is supposed to warn people that there is an impending danger, there is an impending risk, so that it can be distributed and everyone could be able to be informed at the same time. But I just wanted to mention something on financing. We understand actually the resources will never be enough. And I think that is where the role of policy comes in, that is where KIPPRA comes in. We are going down to do some micro-analysis, because in the survey that we did, we were asking people, what did you lose? How many animals did you lose? How did you cost this animal? What was the value of this animal? So once we are able to analyze, we can actually be able to come up with a figure that we can be able, this is a tangible figure. It may not be the actual figure, but this is a tangible figure that you can be able to say when there is drought, this is how much the country loses. Now, when we are now doing our planning, when we are allocating, we can actually be able to see what we lose, because he said that we lose 7 times than what we would have done if we prevented it. So having this information in the planning can be able to see that that is 7 times of what we would have done if we had to plan and be able to respond to that risk early enough.
All right, very good proposals he's giving there. I wish we could continue with this conversation, but we've run out of time. I'll give you a chance to give us your final remarks. Just going forward, what would be that one thing you'd like to remind the country and even the stakeholders in this, in terms of drought and flood preparedness? What is that one thing that you'd like to play this morning?
One thing is to say that when it comes to drought element, it's not that it comes all of a sudden. It comes, it creeps in over time. And now, when you look at the financial sector, they're coming up with various products, insurance, crop insurance, livestock insurances, and the like. And these products, they are yet to, to see a bigger market. Yeah, there are very few people who are going for them, but for those who have gone for them, they are actually benefiting. And there is new technology, remote sensing. There is a satellite-based technology that is coming up, because the key thing that the insurance companies would say is that, how would I manage to actually say this is the risk premium? This is the amount that I'm going to pay you. But now with the new technology, it's very easy for them to really understand what is going on and when they need to pay, what triggers compensation for the losses. So I would add that we are able to take up the new products that are there for preparedness, but at the same time is to keep watch on the early warning signals. When they are given to us, we don't say seeing is believing, and then I'll respond, I'll wait and see when it is done.
Yes. Thank you for that. And I like the proposal you gave about even sending SMS alerts whenever there is something that has been predicted. Like the way we are reminded during the voting season by IEBC through messages all the time. I think it would be very nice also to remind just people about this all the time so that they know what is happening and what they should expect in their regions. That is a very good proposal. Any final remarks you have?
Yes, I think we need to do more, given that we have somewhere to start, and we don't need to focus only on droughts and floods only. The other day we started collecting well from Turkana, taking it to Port of Mombasa. In itself, that is a risk. Okay, those trucks that are moving on the road are risky. So we need to sit down and be able to map all those risks, so that even when we are coming up with a strategy, a policy to be able to manage these risks, it will be comprehensive. Yes. All
right. Thank you so much. That is Joshua Laichena, a policy analyst from the Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and Analysis. He was accompanying the executive director herself, Dr. Rose Ngugi, for this particular interview. Thank you so much, both of you, for creating time to have this very useful conversation. And on that note, we are just taking a very short commercial break. Remember, Good Morning Kenya continues. Today being the 14th of June 2018. It is the budget reading day, that big day that Kenyans have been waiting for. That event should be happening to all the way, to all through today. So KBC Channel 1 actually is a place to be, as we will be informing you what is coming up throughout the day, talking about this particular great day and the budget itself, what it promises for you as a Kenyan and what we should expect going forward. So stay with us. That conversation should be starting right after the break. My colleague Brian Kimani will be joining me for that. So stay with us.